Hi and welcome down to the allotment on the 21st of February. It's about to turn very chilly. Today my main task is to tackle the pruning of the soft fruits. These pruning secateurs are called anvil, and they're for the thicker stems like this on this gooseberry plant. This is an older gooseberry plant and quite woody and thick. As you can see, looking down into the crown, the very older wood has been pruned out and back, in many cases just to one bud. Here for instance there's just one bud there, and you have to do this and you have to let light in and get this classic goblet shape. This red currant bush has been left really, so this year's been the first year it's been properly pruned. These are the newer growths. You can see these coming up here, there's one there and others you can see around that. The older wood, I've only really just started on pruning this, and this will be a project that will have to be carried on next year, but hopefully this year will produce some fruit because it's more open to the air and more open for pollinators. And that's today's job, as you can see, going all the way along here on this border here. These gooseberries hardly produced any fruit last year, and the obvious answer is because the pollinators weren't able to get in and out. They were too crowded. All around here by me I've actually dug out loads of suckers, and you can see them here, and then to my right behind here, look on the ground, you can see all of the pruning that's been carried on so far today. So there's a lot that needs to be removed when you're doing gooseberries. I've been very pleased with the way that the kale I've had has overwintered. As you can see, it's happily growing even after being cropped, and I usually take a little bit back every time. It's quite high in calcium, this, so not too good for my pets, the guinea pigs. They shouldn't have too much calcium, but for us humans, fantastic. And also still got a bit of chard going as well. Instead of planting potatoes in this particular spot on the allotment, I've decided to put my hardwood and softwood cuttings here. These have been cut just below a bud, okay, and then on the top of them I've angled the cut. As you can see, you're supposed to aim for a 45-degree angle really, and that lets the rain come off. And things such as this blackcurrant and also some fruit trees which I've taken cuttings from, including almonds as well. I'm going to see whether these root hormone underneath them. Some of them are pear cuttings as well, and basically I'll wait. Apparently I might have to wait 3 or 4 months to see whether they root, and the way to tell is if you try and pull them out of the ground the roots resist, but of course you have to wait a few months. In my last video about cooking I was making beetroot crisps and sweet potato crisps. This is one of the beetroot patches that I've got. It's called beetroot Pablo, if you want to know what the variety is, and it tends on these clay soil to go and form very large beetroots, but even after being in the ground this long over winter they're still very edible, and I usually take 1 or 2 home. One of the things I focus on a lot of my allotments is growing fruit trees on dwarf rootstock. 1 or 2 people have questioned me about things, so here I am showing you what I do. There's a lot of weeding that goes on around the trees. Here we have 3 gauge trees, and for the first year now I've now actually made sure they're totally surrounded by garlic. This is because this particular tree and many fruit trees are prone to attack by all sorts of rot, which is basically either blossom rot or canker. And you can see on the trunk of this tree where this has been attacked, but I keep spraying with my homemade sprays, and this gauge tree has been heavily pruned, opened up into that open sort of goblet shape as you can see against the overcast sky. The idea is let the light in and less is more, and you will find any fruit that comes. I'm aiming for these here on the branches here. You will have fruiting buds. Some trees are spur bearers. That means they will bear fruit off the side, the little spur, and some are tip that means right on the end. Some are both. So say for instance apple trees, you can find bramleys are tip and spur bearers. But with these gauges the risk is always attack by rot. They're not, the leaves aren't open. Behind the tree is a frost pocket, so I basically put some black sheeting along it to help, because black absorbs radiation. This spiky little bush is actually a damson, and at the moment it's standing around 3.5 to 4 feet high, and it was planted by me from a tiny seedling, and I found that the parent plant was in a patch of weeds and it had sprouted loads and loads of seedlings, and I just got one seedling, and basically I knew what it was from its parent plant, and it's now on the allotment, and I've got a number of these, some of them grown from seed. Basically they're sort of a half bush, half tree, and they're used for dwarf rootstock. This one of course I'm looking for fruit from it, and again it needs its own space and light. Perfect for an allotment because it can be controlled and they don't grow too high. This apple tree basically has been kept by me at no higher than about 4 to 5 feet, and the idea is to get it to spread so that the actual fruit comes on spurs on each branches, as you can see, these little side branches. Last year got a fairly decent crop off it, quite tasty, and this year aiming for a good crop as well. You will have to watch out for fungus, and you'll have to watch out for ants, and again I'm going to be planting a load of garlic plants, which I do propagate on my plot around this bare patch which has been dug around. In days of old, in old gardens, they actually employed gardeners to dig around the roots of fruit trees so they didn't spread too much, and they used special sharp blades to do this, like a sort of a trenching tool, and I do dig around them myself, but these are on a dwarf rootstock, so there you go. Having put plenty of manure and top dressings on my rhubarb, they're now, as you can see, happily sprouting. On the borders of my allotment you'll find this plant growing, and it's known as comfrey. Comfrey was originally brought to the UK in this form by the Crusaders, and it was brought back home with them as a bone setter for treating their injuries. But luckily for us, a lot of this was found growing around these river meadows where knights had estates in the what is now England, and basically we use it as a fertilizer. Basically you can dig up bits of it, put it in some water, let it ferment, and it'll make yourself a liquid bio manure. These beautiful stark yellow and red plants are called cornus, and I first saw them growing near the River Trent in people's gardens, and they're grown for their winter beauty. Look how stark they are on their branches, and the red is a beautiful fiery red behind the yellow one, and I really like these on the allotment, just as sort of a statement piece. It really cheers me up seeing them in the starkness of winter. I never try to fight the soil too much. On very heavy rich clay soils certain plants love to grow. For instance these blackberries, and these are local blackberries that are found on the River Trent and around the Midlands of England. It was called the belly of England in medieval times because here a lot of the food was grown, and the Anglo-Saxons had their kingdoms was basically sort of based around the River Trent. Just down the river here was one of their capitals, so basically that's why you'll find a lot of the food originally used by peoples. And of course blackberries have been eaten since Neolithic times and before, and I've got cuttings here as you can see, and they've been heavily pruned, and this patch will be left to grow wild, and the bumblebees will love it. Well, that's about it for this evening. Back in the 15th century this is the place where the knights used to joust, and all the land as far as the eye could see around this river plain belonged to Lord Lavelle and his family. It was all part of the Stoke estates. Over the hill there, as you can see, from the north we've got some ominous clouds coming Not much rain yet, but they're not looking too friendly. Well, that's it today after the pruning and also some weeding. So I think it's nice time to have a nice little flask of tea before heading off home from the allotment. See you all, and I'll be watching your stuff as well. Take care.